All right, welcome everyone to the pre-Thanksgiving edition of Donovan and Dino, presented by Master Pizza, alongside Jim Donovan and Dave DeNatale. Happy Thanksgiving, my friend.
You too, Dino.
Indeed, indeed. We're brought to you by Master Pizza. Now, you may not be having turkey tomorrow, but tonight's a great night to get yourself some Master Pizza. Download the Master Pizza app on your smartphone and earn those pizza points from Master Pizza. Taste above all. All right, my friend, it is, because this is our last show of the week, with the holiday and everything, I mean, it's kind of all Browns all the time here as we get ready for Sunday. And the point you made to me the other day when we were doing After Further Review, that you have to go back 30 years to find really the last time that a Browns team went into Pittsburgh as really the favorite and with the better team, the better roster, top to bottom. For injuries or whatever, it's the reality is, I mean, this has been uncharted waters for a long time here for this franchise.
Absolutely. And I do believe they go over there with the better roster at this particular time. Mm-hmm. They go over with the better roster. It would have been very interesting if Roethlisberger, was healthy and playing. And if James Conner was healthy, we'll take Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell out of it because they weren't part of the Steelers at the beginning of the year. But Big Ben's a big part of the domination of the Steelers over the Browns and many other teams, but in particular over the Browns because Big Ben took great delight in beating the Browns. He never lost to them at Heinz Field, and he only lost a couple of times over here.
Right.
But anyway, he's a big part of it. But take him out and consider what their running back situation is, what their wide receiver situation is. Juju Smith-Schuster didn't practice again today. They're without their all-pro center, who's still on suspension. Marquise Pouncey, James Conner is got a bad shoulder. I don't think he's going to be in the lineup and play on Sunday. The Browns go in with a better team,
right,
on paper.
Now, and I think we can agree on that. The thing that concerns me is that, whenever, and it was a point you brought up, and I know you've talked about it all week on shows and everything, because I think it's so important. There's always a time when you play on the road against your rival, especially in an environment like Heinz Field, something's not going to go your way. There's going to be a turnover. Right. There's going to be a call that's going to go against you. Something is going to happen unexpected that's going to fire up the crowd, and it's that moment of truth, and can you rise above it, or are you going to let that kind of become a tidal wave? And we've seen that so many times in Pittsburgh in the past.
Yeah, I think that is the place. I mean, you're right. It does happen, and it happens wherever you go, and that's what makes it so challenging to win on the road. And it also makes it so rewarding when you do win on the road, if you can fight through that, because invariably you go in and something happens, and like Dino just expressed, I mean, something goes a little haywire, and you're challenged, and the crowd gets into the game, and it's not your crowd. But nowhere more than at Heinz Field in Pittsburgh. So I'll take two occurrences. The playoff game, the only time the Browns have been in the playoff. I mean, they're up by double digits the whole game.
Yeah.
And they're coming down the field in the third quarter of the game. And the Steelers are just about put away.
Yes.
Just about put away. And Kelly Holcomb has been on fire the entire day because if you remember, Tim Couch had broken his leg in the Atlanta Falcon game, which was the last game of the regular season. And Holcomb was playing just out of this world. And he threw an interception. And I remember just going, that's cute. Yep. Good for the Steelers.
Yeah.
Good for the Steelers. And they were down by double digits, and it happened. Mm-hmm. And the Browns couldn't put the brakes on it, and they couldn't stop it. And it was just an avalanche of emotion and crowd noise. And suddenly Dennis Northcutt's dropping passes, and
Tommy Maddox can't miss.
Tommy Maddox can't miss. The Browns can't get to Tommy Maddox. It was and that's how it happened. And then there was an opening game when Brian Hoyer played. Mm-hmm. And so Mike Pettin was the head coach, and Brian Hoyer went over there, and the Browns got blown out in the first half. But they charged back in the second half, totally took the momentum away from the Steelers. And they're driving to win the game, to win the football game. And they line up like on a third down and just short, and they don't get the first down. And they punt, and Roethlisberger takes them right down the field, and at the final gun, I don't know if it was Boswell at the time. It might have been Chris Boswell kicked the winning field goal, and you walk out of there again.
Right.
And that's what happens. I'm telling you, and it will happen Sunday. I'm not saying they will be presented with a situation. Now, whether or not they can handle it, that's what we're going to find out. But they have more than enough talent to put their thumb in the dike when it's starting to leak and end it.
They've said all the right things since the helmet.
Yeah, I agree with
incident.
you. Yeah.
I mean, they really have. I mean, from Freddie Kitchens to Player, the way they played against the Dolphins indicate, especially the way they came out against Miami. It was like, instead of letting Miami think that they had a shot, and I mean, got a little dicey in the second half, but to put a 28-point lead up in the first half, it's like that's as focused as we've seen this football team. Period. No Myles Garrett or no Myles Garrett, and they got. I mean, if they can maintain that kind of focus,
right.
I think they can win in Pittsburgh. I think they can win in any environment.
Yeah, I think they have that kind of talent, and certainly against the teams that they're going to be playing, Pittsburgh, and then all the way down to the end of the season. Now the Baltimore situation will present itself, but Arizona, Cincinnati, and Pittsburgh. I mean, those are basically the teams they're playing, and then Baltimore. I mean, they have the talent that they can beat those teams. Now, the big thing, there was a bit of a concern today, and it's a real concern. The Browns' left tackle is hurt.
Yes.
He showed up to the facility this morning with concussion symptoms. They immediately put him in concussion protocol. He was down at that charity event on Tuesday.
Yeah.
He was fine. Everybody that saw him said he was, really great.
Did a radio interview on Cleveland Browns Daily.
And they said it was the best time they've ever had talking with Greg Robinson, but he came down with headaches. And when he showed up to practice today, and, in the new NFL, you don't mess around with that. Now, that's a real problem going into the game because he had, since his benching, he had come back and played very well.
Yes.
He was the Greg Robinson of the last 8 games from last year. So if they have to go and look for someone else, here are the possibilities. They have Kendall Lamb, who is ready to go. He was not active last week, but he had practiced all week. He's been coming back from a knee for a pretty good amount of time. So they have him, but he really hasn't played at all this year, except in the opening game when Robinson got kicked out. That's right. They have Justin McCray, who's a guard, okay, but they have had to play him at tackle in a couple of occasions. Now, that's a good pass rush. I mean, Freddie Kitchens came up with a couple of great stats today. The Steelers have 38 sacks on the season. 30 of them are at Heinz Field.
Wow.
Okay, so that's that home crowd, and that's the effect.
Yeah.
They are +9 in the turnover ratio at Heinz Field.
Wow.
So not having your left tackle, can give
That's
you the
a concern.
woolies. Yeah. Now, what you do is you run.
Yeah.
You run the ball, and they are ready to do that.
Yeah, they're ready to do it, but can they stick? Will they stick to it? I mean, I just feel like I have to send a note to Freddie in like the third quarter. It's like, hey, don't forget Chubb Hunt.
Yeah.
Because sometimes they go away from it, and because I think it's maybe it's Freddie still wanting to make sure people know. Not that I think they forget that Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham are on this football team, but it's like, oh yeah, we can still beat you throwing the football, but Chubb and Hunt are the guys that generally get you to the point where you're scoring points.
Yeah, and especially if you're on the road. I really think they become very, very important. Not to plug the show, but to plug the show.
Please.
On Dog Pound Radio today and on Sirius with Bernie Kosar. He made a brilliant point. He said that the dynamics have changed dramatically in the Browns offense, and it is an ever-growing offense. Whereas most teams are offensively, this is what you are, and this is what you're going to get, and this is what we do, and there's not much we can do about it.
Right.
The Browns are changing, they're growing, and it's all Kareem Hunt.
Yes.
Okay? The fact that when the Browns put Kareem Hunt and Chubb on the field at the same time, and as the weeks go on, you'll see more and more of that. And we saw more of it last week against Miami. But that will even grow, the occurrences of when they're on the field at the same time. It forces defenses to have to really address both running backs, and it changes the way safeties are playing against the Browns.
Right.
And it benefits Mayfield, Beckham, and Landry. It loosens coverage. He is so good at that.
I'm sure for Freddie Kitchens, it tantalizes you to say, man, if the safety is cheating, man, let's go right now. Let's throw it up.
Yeah.
And I never have a problem with that, except when you're trying to run out the clock and run out a game when you're up by a couple of scores.
Yeah.
By the way, Bo says he's watching us right now, but he's listening to
Dog Pound Radio. That's right.
You get
God bless you.
Double Jimmy all the time.
Come over to the house tomorrow for Thanksgiving dinner. I'm going to feed you.
That's right. But Bernie is a good person to talk to because, the Browns went through a stretch when Three Rivers Stadium opened from like 1970 to 1986. They didn't win there. And despite how good Brian Sipe and the Cardiac Kids were, they didn't win there. Because bad things and crazy things happen. When Bernie finally, in his first full year as the starter, with Slaughter, Langhorne, Mac Biner, etc., they went out there and they beat Pittsburgh, and it kind of was their launching pad to a 12-4 season.
I'm glad you brought that up. He told that story today, and just to elaborate on that a little bit more. If you remember, if you've been a long-time Browns fan, you remember that they did everything and kept calling it a Three Rivers jinx.
Yes.
And that infuriated Bernie because he doesn't believe in that. He just believes in, if you have a better team than them, you go over and you beat them.
Yep.
If they have a better team than you, they probably beat you. And he knew he had a better team going over there that year. But if you remember, the Browns would do everything. They would change hotels every year. They would fly. They would then bus.
Yes.
They would walk, and if they thought it would help. But mostly the hotels. They stayed at every hotel in Pittsburgh to try and change the flow of things. And Bernie said today on the show that, and this gentleman is hearing it probably as I speak, that infuriated him. And he said they went over there and he didn't want to hear anything about that. He was asked about it every day of the week, and he was furious with it because he just knew that they were a better football team and they had to go over and win, and he was positive they would. And he said the greatest feeling he had as a Browns quarterback was going over there in 1986 and how quiet it got late in the game that you could hear a pin drop, and he said that was the greatest feeling to know you went over there and you just beat them.
Yes. And they won there in 86. They won there in 87. They might have actually won there in 88. I know in 89 they did because that was the 51-0 game. Bernie was, in his peak years, they were lights out in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, well, I remember in one of those years you're talking about, I remember going over there the day after Christmas, okay? And the division title was up for grabs.
Yeah.
Whoever won the game that afternoon, it was a Saturday afternoon, and we went over there, and the Browns just took them out to the woodshed that day. Once they broke through in 86, you're right, they started to win over there.
Yeah. The confidence started to really build, and it's like, we can turn this into our house. And it's as I think about this game Sunday, Baker Mayfield doesn't, and I know he was asked about it today, he doesn't fear going into Heinz Field because he's been into every challenging college environment there is, and now in NFL environments, he doesn't fear going into Heinz Field. And, I think he's got confidence now because of this offense that's been kind of upgraded here with Kareem Hunt.
Yeah, he's in a good spot, I think, and I think he knows that things are much better for them offensively right now. They're growing. They really are, and you can see it. I'm sure you all see it too. No, he loves that. Chubb loves that.
Yeah.
They played in big games, and hot rivalries. Mayfield played in Oklahoma, Texas.
Right.
And,
Red River shootout.
Chubb played in Georgia, Florida. Chubb played in the national championship game.
Right.
The other thing is that Kareem Hunt is really looking forward to playing in the game. Now, he told me a story again today.
On Dog Pound Radio.
That touchdown that he scored last week was one of the biggest thrills of his professional career. And he said, I always wanted to score a touchdown at First Energy Stadium. And I said, well, you did the year before. You scored 3.
He was
as a chief.
That game was
frightening.
terrible.
It was frightening. Nobody could touch him.
Right.
He goes, no. As a Brown, I wanted to do it. I went, all right, okay. Important qualification.
He's really, despite everything that has happened, he's really enjoyed these
Oh.
last couple of weeks now. Being able to play and being an important part of this offense. I mean, he's not the feature back like he was in Kansas City, but we've talked about on this show, Chubb and Hunt together, they don't care about that. They
really
love
don't
complimenting each other.
Yeah, they really don't. I mean, you're right. Mack and Biner were very close, okay, and they are still very close,
Yes.
and that's really cool. It really is. And there was no animosity or jealousy between those two. And it paid off. They both went over 1,000 yards one year. These two, in this day and age, guys count carries.
Yes.
These two don't. That's amazing.
That's-
Nick Chubb, my adopted son, does not count carries. I mean, he wants to win, whatever it takes to win. I mean, that's all there is to it. Even when if you watch them like on Sunday, if they do, one of them comes in, the other one goes out. I mean, they high five each other
Right.
when they go out.
Right.
There's no grudge or anything like that. But I believe that the building of the Browns is right now with the two of them on the field at the same time. That is a real frightening thing.
And the thing is, Kareem Hunt doesn't mind blocking for Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb doesn't mind blocking for Kareem Hunt.
No.
They want both to succeed, and they're willing to be receivers out of the backfield. I mean, I love the fact that all of a sudden Nick Chubb last week became effective early in the game as a receiver.
Oh, absolutely.
Before he obviously
First play of the game.
Yeah, I mean, that to me, it was like, man, Kareem Hunt's rubbing off on Chubb. I think it's making Nick, who was already, I think, a good receiver. I think he kind of, because Duke Johnson was here last year and everything. Oh, that's Duke Johnson's job to be your receiver out of the backfield.
Right.
Nick Chubb can catch passes, and I think Kareem Hunt's kind of challenged him to be more of a weapon on the passing game.
I think so, yeah. I mean, if my memory serves me correct, I mean, last week Chubb was over 160 yards in total offense. And I think he had over 50. He had two big plays as a receiver. And, hey, he worked on that diligently in the offseason, and it paid off. I mean, to the point where, let's face it, until Kareem Hunt was eligible, he was the lone guy because Hilliard was hurt, and they wanted to keep Chubb on the field.
Yeah, it's been fun, and it'll be, I agree with you. I think if Greg Robinson can't play, the Browns, this whole Baker Mayfield 30 attempts a game, it needs to be south of 30.
Yeah.
If the Browns
I agree
win
with you.
this game.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Before we get out of here, as you think about the Browns and Steelers, and there haven't been many fun stories in Pittsburgh since you've been the voice of the Browns. I mean, they've only won, I think, twice, I think.
They won the last year at Three River Stadium. Their first year back.
Yeah.
I mean, it was their second win of the year.
Yeah.
Phil Dawson kicked a field goal at the buzzer, and they won. And then the one at Heinz Field.
Yeah, the Sunday night game. But is there, just Browns and Steelers in general, is there a story or a game that sticks out the most to you in the rivalry?
There is a story that it was Eric Mangini's first year, and there was very, very, very questionable whether or not he was going to get a second year.
Right.
Okay, but remember, he ripped off like 4 or 5 wins in a row at the end of the year, and the first one was the Steelers.
Was that a Thursday night game?
It was a Thursday night game, and Pittsburgh looked like they were going to get into the playoffs, but they weren't having a typical Pittsburgh year. And there's a story going around that, it was a Thursday night game. It was bitter cold.
Yes.
Okay, and the Steelers, they were doing enough to get in, but it was really the Ravens, or maybe, it was either the Ravens or the Bengals were really having a really good year to win the division. Probably the Ravens at that time. But the Steelers were probably going to get a wild card, right? And the Browns were just really struggling. And Mangini was having a problem with the guys in the locker room accepting his style and the atmosphere and kind of the culture that he was trying to nurture here. And Josh Cribbs went out and single-handedly beat the Steelers that night with punt returns. I mean, it was so cold. The Steelers, of all people, didn't want to tackle him. And, I mean, it was just amazing. Yeah. And then David Bowens, remember, he came.
Yes.
And the Browns sacked Roethlisberger like 8 times.
Which they never do.
Yeah.
They never got the Roethlisberger.
And Bowens got a couple of picks in the game and an interception to end the game. And it was a great, great night. Now, the word was, because it was a Thursday night game, that Big Ben was planning on them beating the Browns and then leaving immediately and going to Vegas to relax for the weekend or go to a warmer place anyway, which wouldn't have been hard to find. It was so cold here.
Yeah.
It was painfully cold. And the Browns beat him and he's got to go back to Pittsburgh. Yeah, I mean, it was, and they didn't make the playoffs.
Right.
The Browns actually that loss really knocked them out because the Steelers won the rest of their games, but that loss kind of knocked them out.
Cribbs did everything. Like
if anyone understood the rivalry, with the new Browns, he did.
Right.
For some reason, he did. I mean, he grew up in the D.C. area, right? But maybe at his time at Kent State, he kind of learned a little bit about it. Now, see, Kareem Hunt lived it. He grew up in it. But you're right. If you're saying Cribbs really, he knew it.
I mean, he did a wildcat quarterbacking that night. They would pitch to him in the backfield. He was returning punts and kicks.
He covered punts and
kicks. I mean, he was amazing. And I think it was that same season. I think Jerome Harrison went out and set the Browns single-game record against Kansas City.
Yeah, and that's also
Cribbs had like 2 returns that game.
2 kickoff returns. Yeah, back to back. That was an amazing day in Arrowhead, and they got on a run, and it really saved Mangini to get him the second year.
Yeah, because Mike Holmgren didn't have the heart to fire him.
Yeah, Mike Holmgren said, maybe I should get to know this guy. Yeah.
Didn't quite
the only thing was about that was kind of a false winning streak at the end. I mean, the Steeler game, okay, but Jacksonville came here and they didn't want to be here. Okay, and San Francisco came at the end of the year and they definitely I'm sorry, the Raiders came and they definitely didn't want to be here. Okay, and so they kind of mailed it in, but they did win in Kansas City, and it was a shootout game. And you're right, Harrison had a great game, but Cribbs took those 2 back. One of them was over 100 yards.
Yeah. I mean, I can remember just thinking at that point, it's like, man. And same thing with Joe Thomas. It's like, God, I wish these guys could play on a winning team. Never did, but except for 07. But it was pretty amazing to watch him.
Dino, I think that in that Kansas City game, I think Brady Quinn got hurt his foot on a scramble late in the game, and he didn't play the rest of the season. I think he had almost like a Liz Frank injury.
I don't know if he ever played for the Browns again.
I don't think he
did.
Yeah.
They went to Jake Delhomme and Seneca Wallace and Colt McCoy.
That's right.
So they completely changed the quarterback room. Yeah. It's interesting stuff. We'll hopefully have another great Browns memory here for Jim Donovan to tell us about after Sunday, Browns and Steelers Sunday at Heinz Field. Get the turkey leg and enjoy the leftovers for that one, folks. That'll be a lot of fun.
Yep.
My friend, safe travels, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you very much. Happy Thanksgiving,
everybody. Thanksgiving, everyone. Thanks so much for watching Donovan and Dino, presented by Master Pizza, here on 3 News Facebook Live and YouTube.
All right.